thank you for this opportunity to be here to learn another portion of your word, and just ask you to be with Tom as he leads us and directs us, that we can learn something from it to help us in our everyday life. I ask you to be with those that are sick and unnumbered. I ask you to be with those that suffer. Forgive us our many sins and shortcomings. In Christ's name we pray.
Okay, Kevin told me that I needed to start the lesson with this lesson. You notice I do this every week. Kevin said, all your stuff is up there, and I've checked, and it works. He said, because you are. And I said, yes. He said, those of us of a certain age remember the end of the Cold War. Others of you may have read about it in the history books. And President Reagan was giving a speech, I think in Germany, and it was about reaching out to Mr. Gorbachev, and he was asked. Well, they're making the following commitments. They're saying they're going to do these things. How can you be sure of that? And President Reagan said, "Doverie no proverie," which is Russian for trust, but verify. So Kevin, that's why when I come up here, the first thing I trust Kevin and Gid, Jake, whoever has done everything correct, and then I verify. Trust. Okay, we're finishing this morning Galatians 5, fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5, 22 and 23. I know you're thinking, oh, we've been doing this since January. No, not since January. We're about to finish, and then we'll move on. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. So faithfulness is the one remaining that we have not touched. We've worked our way through the others. Now there are those who don't know the difference between faithfulness and faith, and would, if allowed, enact laws against our faith. But against these things in and of themselves there is no law. So what is biblical faithfulness? Faithfulness. Like I've done for most of these classes, I looked across 64, I think 65 translations in the New Testament. Out of 64, 65, whatever the exact number was, probably 55, 58 used the words faith, faithfulness. It didn't say faithfulness. I apologize for the typo. Faith or faithfulness. Probably another 3 use the term fidelity. Very simple. Fidelity, I've seen mostly in technical contexts, in where you have something here, you're wanting to recreate it, you're wanting to copy it, and you verify that the copy has fidelity to the original. Only one, use the term longanimity. Show of hands. How many of you have ever even seen this one before? I hadn't. I had to go look it up. Imagine that. Longanimity. Forbearance. Okay. 1. And I don't think I need to buy a version of that New Testament, because I would spend all my time going to the dictionary, apparently. Trusted to do what is right. Trusted to do what is right. probably one of the nicest compliments any of my kids has had that somebody told me about them was an employer of my older daughter. And he told me that he had walk-away confidence in her. That once they agreed on how something should be done, and it should be done this way every single time, he said, I have walk-away confidence in her. I can walk away, I can trust that it's going to be done, and I don't have to go back and keep checking. And that's a pretty good working definition of faithfulness. Walk-away confidence.
Sad, but we don't live in a world like that today.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Most people can be trusted most of the time. A very small percentage of people can be trusted all or near all of the time. Then you have Sarah. No. See, I was teasing them earlier. And I said that when you do public presentations, and I've spent a good part of my career, both here and secular, doing various types of public presentations, one of those things you just have to build in is this innate ability to scan an audience and very quickly pick out where are the troublemakers. As I'm making this presentation, where do my eyes need to continually go back? But then on occasion, there are also those audiences that you don't really have to work that hard to find it. So there you are. No, back to what I was saying here. And there are a percentage of people that you know for a fact you can never trust anyone. Right?
Generically, trust or faith can be, I trust you won't do what's right, or I trust you will.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have faith in a lot more people that way. Either will or won't.
Yeah. And most people also are motivated. I don't know the percentages. You probably know the percentages better than I do. I'll say most, and then you can correct me. Are motivated by the knowledge of consequences and how readily and how immediately the consequences will be applied. Is that fair? Well, let me give you an absurdly elementary example. Show of hands. How many people in here have ever house trained a puppy? Well, a lot of us have house trained a puppy. Okay? Now, I was taught old school house training of a puppy from my dad, who came from the Middle Ages. And he used the newspaper approach. Yeah. Not the tinking on the newspaper approach, the rolled up newspaper approach. Okay? So let's pretend for a moment that's the approach you're using. If the puppy makes a mistake and gets the newspaper consequence right then, what are the odds that they'll associate the behavior with the newspaper? Very high. But the puppy makes a mistake. You go about your business, you fold the laundry, you come back, you see the puddle, whack, now you strike the puppy. What are the odds? It's just confused. It thinks taking a nap in the sunlight from the window is the mistake. You know, you're never going to get that puppy to take a nap in the sunshine anymore, right? So that's what another big part of faithfulness is the readily present fear of consequences. Now, as Christians, what is the ultimate consequence? Losing your soul. Losing your soul. Being lost for eternity. And here's a bit of trivia for you. Is eternity a long time? I would say no. Time is a created dimension. Eternity exists outside of creation. So time is not a dimension. I have a strong conviction that time is not even a dimension in that place. It's a forever present. There's a difference between a long time and a forever present. Think of your worst day on this planet. It'll be different for each of us. Okay? Your worst day. Now think of that day in terms of a forever present. And what I would add is, being lost is much, much worse than that day was. Probably the most difficult surgery I've had in terms of pain in the immediate sense after it was done was a knee replacement. Now, after 72 hours, it got better fast. I can do this. I can do this. And I got through that 5 minutes. And then thinking, okay, another 5 minutes. What if that's all you ever had to look forward to? Unpleasant. Okay? So, a couple of references. Vine says, faithfulness is a firm persuasion, a conviction based on hearing. What does the New Testament tell us? Faith comes by hearing. There we go. So Vine borrows on that as part of his working definition in his reference. I thought it's a good one. Well, I mean, he would say, yeah, who are you to have an opinion on my work? I just thought it was a good one. As used in the New Testament, it always refers to faith in God or Christ, things spiritual. Outside of things spiritual, probably the biggest two things I have faith in. One is gravity. Anybody know any exceptions to that? And the other is this second law of thermodynamics, entropy. Order always descends into disorder. Always, 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 always. For those of you who have or have had teenagers, you walk in the room after it's been cleaned up, you help them cleaned up, everything's perfect. Come back in 4 hours. They don't even have to have been in the house. What does the room look like? Oh my goodness. Our youngest daughter, Abby, she could walk through a room and I could watch her like a hawk and make sure she touched nothing. And when she exited the room on the other side, pillows would be on the floor. Things would be askew. Stuff would be everywhere. I don't know how that would happen. But that's the second law of thermodynamics. Order tends towards disorder. Always, always, always. Which is, to me, why I don't believe in the Big Bang or natural selection as described by most biology professors. There is no example anywhere in our known universe of disorder assembling itself into that level of order in a more complicated and orderly fashion. There is no example. Except when you get to the creation story and you have people say very scientific words, they wax polysyllabic, and it all means, and then a miracle happened. Faithfulness. You've got to have faith. Thayer, in his lexicon, says this word that we see as faith or faithfulness is the conviction that God exists, is the creator and ruler of all things, and the provider and bestower of salvation. I really latched on to this definition. Because where does it start? T. This definition right here, how does it begin? Thayer's Greek English Lexicon. Where does it start? You have to start with the conviction that God exists. If God is theoretical to you, biblical faith will be difficult, if not impossible. It has to be an apprehended fact. Stronger than my belief in gravity and the second law of thermodynamics. Now, having said that, we are all human creatures. Have there been days or moments in your life that you doubted that God was there? Sometimes makes it hard. There's a great line in the song, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Where does the love of God go when the waves turn the minutes to hours? In those moments where you don't know what's going to happen, where mortality is on the line and you have no control over your circumstances. He says, where does the love of God go? But Christians have to understand and latch on to, it's still there. It may be just be difficult for me to articulate it right now. But not only that he exists, but he's not some distant, indifferent, vengeance-filled ruler. It's an important part. The provider and bestower of salvation. You know what hampered me at one time from becoming a member of the church and embracing churches like congregations like we're in right now? That many of you grew up in, some of you came to later in life like I did, was some of the people I spoke to and some of the ways they characterized God led me to believe that their perception of God was this vengeful character waiting for them behind every bush and corner, hoping to condemn them to perdition if he just got a chance. You ever run across that? You ever know anybody that projected that kind of faith? God is not for you. God is out to get you. And I had to get past that. I had to get past that notion and find a conviction that fit within the framework of the church that God's on my side. God wants me to be successful. God has given me every chance and shown me the way and extended his grace in such a way that I can be successful. How far does the grace of God extend? For my own sake, I hope as far as possible. The Psalms are interesting in that David almost always associates the word faithfulness with God. Now, there's a couple of Psalms where he'll talk about his own faithfulness, but he almost always uses the term relative to God. And in these contexts, your mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the clouds. I have declared your faithfulness and your salvation. Now, this was a man born into and raised under the law of Moses. How often do we associate salvation with living under the law of Moses? Not frequently. But the person described in the Bible in multiple places as the man after God's own heart. I have declared your faithfulness and your salvation. In an era of the legalistic Mosaic code. Maybe that right there is one of the key contributors to why David is described. Because he can see the purpose of the law. He can see through the law. He can see why is all this in place. It's in place for that thing right there. David had that capacity. Your faithfulness endures to all generations. These are just three that I picked out. They're throughout the Psalms. But like I said, David almost always uses these terms with reference to God. But now, you need your Bibles out because we're going to look at some Old Testament passages, and I know how many of you love flipping through the Old Testament looking for some of these things. Okay? Interesting uses of the word faithfulness. Lamentations. The Lamentations of who? That was a question. Tick, 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 tick. Who wrote Lamentations? No one is answering. Jeremiah. The history teacher gets the problem. Okay? In Lamentations chapter 3. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed. Because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Where do you see that term, that expression, great is thy faithfulness, most often? A hymn. Great is thy faithfulness. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed. Dana and I were having a conversation this morning on the way here to the building. And it was how some people, I believe, I'm speaking only for myself, Dana at least was courteous enough not to say, you're so full of garbage. No. So we were having this conversation. That people misunderstand the term meek, and they misunderstand the word grace. Meek doesn't mean timid, weak, and unable to defend themselves. It's not a chipmunk faced by a hawk. Meek means the ability to summon great strength and great threat, but choosing not to. Moses, the meekest man who ever lived, what could Moses summon? And what did Moses demonstrate to the Egyptians that could be summoned? The vengeance of God. So people knew that was there, but it wasn't always extended. Grace. Grace is not something bestowed by a weak, toothless, inoffensive, passive God. Grace is something bestowed by a massive, omnipotent God that the Bible tells us it is a terrible thing to fall into the hands of a living God. But he chooses not to. He chooses to extend grace and salvation. It's important to understand the difference. So Jeremiah says, through his mercy we are not consumed. His compassions don't fail. They're new every morning. Let's turn to Hosea chapter 2. This one was fascinating to me. Hosea chapter 2, I'll begin with verse 19, but first we have to talk about Hosea. Hosea married. What do you know about Hosea's wife that he married? She was a prostitute. She was a prostitute with children. And Hosea was directed to marry a prostitute with children. And the entire book then exists within the context of Hosea's relationship to this woman. Was she faithful in the marriage? No, she returned to her previous behaviors because it was a picture of the nation. So, when Hosea was prophesying, saying, you people, think about Hosea telling you this, how well would you receive it? My life is a picture of your relationship to God. I have married a prostitute who prostituted herself willingly. What does that mean the nation was? It's this and then even after he had accepted this prostitute and embraced her in marriage, she went back to what she did before. Now, if you're the nation of Israel, is that a complimentary way to be described? No. How popular do you think Hosea was with that message? Not very. But if you don't understand that context, this passage doesn't have much meaning. Once you understand the context, it becomes extraordinarily powerful. For Hosea chapter 2, verse 19, I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice, in loving kindness and mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. That's who he said, I will marry you. I will marry you in faithfulness. I will marry you in loving kindness and mercy. And I will be faithful to you. Okay, let's turn to chapter 6 and verse 4. Same book. O Ephraim, what shall I do to you? O Judah, what shall I do to you? For your faithfulness is like a morning cloud, and like the early dew, it goes away. Within this picture of being married to this prostitute, who, after being shown every measure of love and faithfulness and kindness and embracing her, she has gone back to her previous ways. And he describes the nation now, knowing she's a picture of the nation. Your faithfulness is like a morning cloud, and like the early dew, it goes away. How long do the morning clouds last? Till the heat of the day begins. How long does the morning dew last? Till the heat of the day begins to set. And then it's gone. And then it's gone. And he's saying, this is your faithfulness. But God's faithfulness, as he's going to give you in the context here, is not like that. It's different. And it's different in spite of you being what you are. In this case, his faithfulness to his wife was in spite of her being what she was. Unfortunately, and not to belabor anyone's circumstances, all of you have seen or experienced relationships that suffered similar types of lack of faithfulness. And the pain associated with that is extreme. That's the pain God talks about when we are not faithful. When the nation was not faithful. And it's important to us. It's important to God that we maintain faithfulness. Romans chapter 3, let's turn over there. Here Paul is giving a defense about being a Jew, not being a Jew, and how this is going to have to do with faithfulness. For what if some don't believe? Will their unbelief make the faithfulness of God without effect? Certainly not. Indeed, let God be true, but every man a liar. As it is written, that you may be justified in your words and overcome when you are judged. And clearly, a lot of people don't believe in God. But does their disbelief make void the presence of God? No. No, not. And that's his point here. That God's faithfulness to us is going to stand true. And as we talked about with David in the Psalms. So what does faithfulness not look like? And I just picked on our society here for a little bit. You know somebody's faithful when they have a Bible reference bumper sticker or a t-shirt with a biblical message. Right? That's hard and fast truth right there. I'm not saying I have a problem with bumper stickers or t-shirts. I'm just saying that clearly that is not the beginning and ending of faithfulness. This is one that sets my teeth on edge when it comes up. What I call throwaway advice that you give to someone so that you can make a quick exit. Let's say Charles is in the hospital. His life is in the balance. We don't know if he's going to see the end of the day. But you know, I got places to be and things to do, right? I got to go get the oil change in my truck. They may be closing soon. So I come over and, Charles is suffering. And he knows he may not see the end of the day. Well, Charles, we're just supposed to be faithful in all things. And brother, all things work to the good of those who love Jesus. And you have a nice day. I'll see you. That's what I mean by throwaway advice. You ever see that get offered? That is not faithfulness. Conditional faithfulness. It's a transaction. God, if you will do this for me, then I will do that. God, if you wrench me out of this fix that I've created for myself, then in the future I will be faithful. That's a transaction. That's not faithfulness. And not to make light, but what's the big children's hospital in Memphis? St. Jude's. Supposedly that came from, I don't know, the story that they tell. And St. Jude's does a lot of good things. Please don't mistake the reference. Anybody besides people my age remember who Danny Thomas was? If you say yes, then we're admitting something. Supposedly, St. Jude's Hospital came about as what I would call a transactional prayer on Danny Thomas's part, right? Well, things worked out. I would not to diminish anything that's done at a fine hospital. But it was a transactional prayer. Equating a standard of living that is tied to prosperity, health, wealth, etc. I am an absolute rejecter and declared anathema all aspects of the prosperity gospel. Well, you know, kid, God wants you to be faithful. And God's going to be faithful to you. And if you'll just plant some seed faith, God will be faithful, God will reward your seed faith, and God will see to it that you enjoy the prosperity that you know in your heart that He can provide you. What did I just do? I tried to shake Gid down for a donation. I didn't say, Gid, I want your money. What did I tell him he needed to do? He needed to plant some seed faith. And when this plate goes around, I don't want to hear the jingling of change. I want to fold in money. That's a Reverend Ike reference, if you remember Reverend Ike. They would bring the plates up, and Reverend Ike would step over and look. And if the plates weren't full enough, send them back out. Y'all hadn't planted enough seed faith. Yet I need a new Rolex. My Cessna Citation, the engine hours are up. And I can't preach to the needy and unfortunate in Bangladesh without a new Citation. All you got to do, Gid, is plant some seed. Clearly, I think the prosperity gospel is a pox on modern religion. But it's not faithfulness. It's a shakedown for cash. Now, if I were someone preaching today in a formerly NBA Coliseum with 15,000 people in the audience wearing a $20,000 suit and a $50,000 watch, I probably wouldn't tell you that it's a shakedown. That wouldn't play well, right? But that's what it is. It's not faithfulness. So how do we end? Let's turn to Hebrews 11. What do we typically call Hebrews chapter 11? Yeah. And it's have you heard the term Hall of Fame? By faith, Enoch, by faith, Abel, by faith, Noah, by faith, Sarah. All these died in faith, not having received the promises. By faith, Abraham, by faith, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which were visible. I have a picture that I keep on my laptop. I cherish it. And it's a picture of the night sky, taken back in the 90s. And if I put it up on the screen, it would look like it was filled with stars. But they're not stars. They're galaxies. Over 10,000 galaxies in that one image. 10,000 galaxies. And you know how much of the night sky that picture is? If we step out here on the street, and Kevin paced off 100 yards and set a tennis ball down on the street. A tennis ball. And if we stood right here and looked down the street at the tennis ball, that's how much of the night sky that picture represents. It's called the Hubble Deep Field. And over 10,000 galaxies in that tennis ball at 100 yards. It's incredible. So it begins, and let's go back. I'll step through this quickly. To Thea. Not only does God exist, but He's the creator and ruler of all things, and the provider and bestower of salvation. He's not out to get you. He can. Because it's a terrible thing to fall into the hands of the living God. But God's on your side. God did all of these things because He loved us. And He extends His mercy and grace to us because He loves us. Think of the most powerful, the most threatening, but yet the most secure feeling person you've ever been around. And it's not even close. My dad loved that. Grown men were afraid of my father. He had an air of threat to him. He had an air of, do not cross this line or it will cost you. Grown men kept their distance and watched their words around my dad. And if he would have thought, T, that you were a moment's threat to that person right there, it would not have gone well for you. But he wasn't God and he wasn't even close. That's what we have. We just have to be faithful. Thank you very much. That's the lesson.